In 1597, on the southwestern shores of the Korean peninsula, a man stood with 13 ships against around 330 enemy vessels. It was illogical, suicidal, insane. But this man won one of the greatest naval victories in war history. So how was this possible? How could one person disregard numerical superiority? And most importantly, how did this man's military genius shape modern naval warfare? Tonight we will discover together the story of Korea's greatest hero, perhaps history's most genius admiral, Yi Sun-sin. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and write in the comments which city you're following us from. Now let's dive into the 16th century Korea. Yi Sun-sin was born on April the 28th, 1545 in Hanseong, present-day Seoul. His family, belonging to the Deoksu-Yi clan, was considered noble, but his grandfather had been removed from office with an accusation, so the family had lost its prestige. Young Yi loved playing war games as a child, which was the first sign of his future military genius. At that time, the Joseon Kingdom was experiencing a relatively peaceful period, but Jurchen raiders on the northern borders constantly posed a threat. For Korean nobles raised in Confucian tradition, military career wasn't considered prestigious because intellectual work and civil service were more valuable. But Yi was different. In 1572, he took military exams and an extraordinary event occurred. During the exam, he fell from his horse, broke his leg. But he didn't give up. He made an emergency splint from a willow branch and continued the exam. This determination summarized his character. When he began his military career, the Korean army didn't make a clear distinction between land and naval forces. So in 1580, he was appointed to his first duty as a naval commander in the southern tip. However, 2 years later, his refusal to overlook corruption drew his superior's anger, and he was removed from duty. Throughout Yi's life, his greatest enemies wouldn't be the Japanese but the scheming rivals in his own court. In 1592, everything changed. Japan's ruler, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, gave the order to invade Korea. His aim was to use Korea as a stepping stone to conquer Ming China. Japan was powerful. Its samurai were the world's best swordsmen, and they had recently learned rifle technology from the Portuguese. On May 23, 1592, a massive Japanese invasion force landed in Busan. 158,000 soldiers, hundreds of ships, unlimited ambition. The Joseon army was unprepared, and the Japanese advanced at a terrifying speed. They reached Seoul in just 19 days. The Korean army was scattering, the capital was falling, the king was fleeing. However, at sea the situation was different. Yi Sun-sin had been appointed left Jeolla Province naval commander in 1591, and this appointment would save Korea. As soon as he took office, he inspected ships, trained the crew, tested weapons. He had never fought a naval battle, but with strategic intelligence, he studied Japanese and Korean naval warfare tactics. The Japanese Navy was based on a distinctive strategy. They made ships wide and flat because their real strength was samurai. Their tactic was simple but effective. Approach the enemy ship as closely as possible, rain arrows, then bind the ships with chain hooks and jump aboard for close combat. This tactic had worked perfectly in Japan's civil wars. Yi Sun-sin immediately noticed this tactic's weak point. If the Japanese couldn't approach the ships, they were powerless. Korean ships must be designed differently. The backbone of the Korean Navy was formed by warships called panoxeon. Panoxeon meant plank-decked ship in Korean, and took its name from its two-level wooden deck structure. These ships were made of solid pine wood, were approximately 30 to 35 meters long, and could carry more than 80 crew. Its most important feature was that it could carry many cannons. Japanese ships were made of light cedar wood and couldn't carry heavy weapons, but Panoxions had dozens of cannons on both sides and front-back. Thus, they had long-range firepower. Yi also developed a revolutionary ship, Geobuxion, meaning turtle ship. This ship's name came from its appearance. Its upper deck was curved like a turtle shell and completely enclosed, covered with iron plates. Enemy soldiers couldn't jump onto the ship because the deck was equipped with sharp spikes. There was a dragon-headed bow figure, and during battle, smoke came from its mouth, which frightened the enemy, and at the same time protected Korean gunners' line of sight from enemy arrows. The turtle ship was extremely resistant to cannon fire and could dive into the enemy fleet and destroy ships. Smaller than normal warships, but much more dangerous. Yi used these ships as the vanguard of fleets to break enemy lines and create chaos. However, Yi's real genius wasn't in the ships, but in his tactics. On June 13th, 1592, Yi set out on his first naval expedition. With 24 Panoxions, 15 small warships, and 46 boats, he advanced toward Okpo. The Japanese navy was anchored in the harbor and supporting land soldiers. Yi made a sudden attack. Korean ships fired their cannons using range advantage. The Japanese were shocked because they hadn't thought the Korean navy would be this powerful. The Japanese quickly tried to board ships, but Yi pulled the ships back, maintained distance. The Japanese couldn't approach. Korean cannons were tearing apart enemy ships one by one. In the Battle of Okpo, 26 Japanese ships were sunk. Yi didn't lose a single ship. This was just the beginning. In the following weeks, Yi began a victory series at Sacheon, at Danghangpo, at Dangpo. The same tactic in every battle. Maintain distance, use cannons, prevent Japanese from jumping onto ships. The Japanese were helpless at sea, and supply lines of land armies began to be cut. However, Yi's greatest victory hadn't yet come. On August 15th, 1592, a historic battle would take place off Hansen Island. This battle would change naval warfare history. Yi received intelligence. Japanese Admiral Wakizaka Yasuharu was advancing from the west with a fleet of 73 ships. Yi united with Admiral Wongyun and Admiral Yi Eok-gi. Their total force became 56 warships. Wakizaka was an experienced and aggressive commander, one of Hideyoshi's most trusted 7 spears of Shizugatake. Wakizaka's ships were anchored at Gyeonaeriang Strait. The strait was narrow and full of rocks, dangerous for a large fleet. Yi made a brilliant plan. He would lure the Japanese into a trap. He sent 6 Panoxion ships to the strait, as if they were scouting. Wakizaka swallowed the bait. 63 Japanese ships began chasing the Korean ships. Korean ships slowly withdrew from the strait toward open sea. Wakizaka saw a complete opportunity, continued chasing with his entire fleet. When they reached open sea off Hansen Island, they suddenly stopped. Yi's main fleet was in front of them. Yi gave his famous order, Hakik-jin, crane wing formation. Korean ships suddenly opened in a crescent shape. Large warships in the center, lighter ships on the wings, a turtle ship at each end. The Japanese suddenly found themselves surrounded. This formation was used in land battles, but Yi applied it at sea. This was a revolutionary innovation. The formation's logic was brilliant. Thanks to the crescent-shaped arrangement, Many Korean ships could fire at the same Japanese ship simultaneously, providing crossfire opportunity. The Japanese had to attack from a narrow front. Wakizaka, loyal to his aggressive character, moved toward the center. Japanese ships were rowing as fast as possible, trying to reach Korean ships. But this was exactly what Yi wanted. The deeper the Japanese went, the more they were surrounded by Korean ships. Turtle ships charged forward. Thanks to their iron plates, they were resistant to Japanese arrows and rifles. They dove into the enemy formation, created chaos. Then Panoxions began firing. Dozens of cannons exploded simultaneously, making sounds like thunder. Japanese ships were throwing chains and hooks, trying to grab Korean ships, but Yi's ships were constantly moving, maintaining distance. Panoxions had a special feature. They could turn in place. Thus, they could constantly turn their cannons toward the enemy. When Wakizaka realized the disaster, it was too late. His ships were breaking apart. Soldiers were falling into the sea. His formation was scattering. He tried to escape, but Korean ships pursued. The battle lasted for hours. In the end, 59 Japanese ships were sunk or captured. More than 9,000 Japanese soldiers died. Yi lost only a few men, and not even a single ship sank. The Battle of Hansen Island became one of the turning points in naval history. British Admiral George Ballard later wrote, Yi Sun-sin achieved in 6 weeks what Nelson, Blake, or even Jean Bart couldn't accomplish. He destroyed the enemy fleet, cut supply lines, endangered victorious armies. He should be recognized as one of history's greatest natural-born leaders. The Japanese invasion stopped. Land forces couldn't receive supplies. Naval dominance was with Korea. Hideyoshi's dream of conquering China was shattered. In 1593, peace negotiations began, and the Japanese withdrew. Yi was given the title Naval Commander of 3 provinces. He took command of the entire Korean Navy. However, his enemies weren't only at sea. Court advisors and rival generals envied Yi. Especially General Won-gyun hated being in Yi's shadow. Intrigues began. Slanders were cast. In 1597, the Japanese prepared for a second invasion. Hideyoshi had learned and this time acted more cleverly. He tried to trap Yi using a double agent. A Japanese agent named Yoshira approached Joseon generals and offered espionage. Yi was suspicious, but the court believed Yoshira. Yoshira gave false information. The Japanese fleet is defenseless in Busan. The court ordered Yi to attack. Yi refused because he knew this was a trap. This disobedience became an excuse. King Seonjo became angry and had Yi arrested on charges of treason. Yi was tortured, was almost executed. At the last moment, the sentence was reduced, and he was sent back to the army as a soldier without rank. Won-gyun took command of the navy in his place. This was disaster for Korea. Won-gyun was incompetent, corrupt, and hated by his soldiers. He didn't train, loosened discipline. The magnificent fleet of 166 ships that Yi had built over years rotted in 1 year. In 1597, the Japanese launched the second invasion, and Won-gyun was caught unprepared. The Battle of Chilchonryang was a complete massacre. In August 1597, Won-gyun attacked the Japanese fleet with 200 ships. But there was no tactic, no coordination, no leadership. The Japanese ambushed. Only 13 of 200 ships were saved. Won-gyun died. The Korean navy had been destroyed. The king recalled Yi in panic. But was it too late now? When Yi arrived at headquarters, he faced the terrible truth. Only 13 ships remained. The king was considering disbanding the navy. An order came to Yi: abandon the ships, join your men to land forces. Yi's answer was legendary. Your Majesty, this servant still has 12 warships. Though the enemy is strong, as long as I am alive, the enemy will never be safe in the Western Sea. There were 12 ships, but a few days later one more ship joined, and the total became 13 ships. The Japanese had hundreds. The logical thing was to surrender, to fight from land. But Yi chose not logic, but strategy. He would fight, but where? How? Yi searched for a battlefield for days. He studied geography, learned currents, evaluated positions. Finally, he found it. Myeongyang Strait, a narrow channel separating Jindo Island from the mainland. The strait was only 300 meters wide, and the currents were terrible. Currents reached speeds of 10 nautical miles per hour and changed direction every 3 hours. Whirlpools, vortices, unpredictable flows. This strait could be a grave, but it could also be a savior. Yi calculated. The narrow strait would neutralize the Japanese numerical superiority. Strong currents would make maneuvering difficult. Timing was everything. On the morning of October 26th, 1597, the Japanese fleet appeared. 133 warships, at least 200 support vessels, around 330 boats total. Commander Kuroshima Michifusa was aggressive and confident. Yi had only 13 ships, and the crew's morale was broken. Fear prevailed. Some were thinking of fleeing. Yi pushed his ship forward, alone. The flagship advanced toward the Japanese vanguard. Other ships hesitated, waited in fear. Yi later wrote in his diary, "My flagship was alone, facing the enemy formation. Only my ship was firing cannons and arrows. None of the other ships advanced. For a while, Yi's ship fought alone like a fortress in the middle of the sea. Cannons were firing. Japanese were trying to approach. When the crew saw Yi's courage, they slowly gained courage. One ship, then another, joined the battle. The Japanese were entering the strait, but currents were forcing them. Ships were piling on top of each other, couldn't maneuver. Yi had calculated this in advance. Kuroshima Michifusa, with his aggressive character, charged forward and approached Yi's ship. But right at that moment, the current changed. 3 hours had passed and the strong current suddenly turned in the opposite direction. Japanese ships went into chaos, crashed into each other, were pushed back. Yi gave his order, attack. Korean ships charged forward, fired their cannons, beat enemy ships. Kuroshima's ship was damaged, and the admiral fell into the sea. His body was retrieved by Korean soldiers. His head was cut off and hung on Yi's ship's mast. When the Japanese saw their commander's head, their morale collapsed. The battle ended with Yi's victory. 31 Japanese ships were sunk or damaged. Yi didn't lose a single ship. There were only a few wounded, 13 ships against around 330 ships. The numerical ratio was more than 1 to 25. But strategy, geographical knowledge, and leadership changed everything. The Battle of Myeongyang is recognized as one of the greatest victories in naval history. Along with Salamis, Trafalgar, and a few other battles, it's counted among the most important naval battles. The victory stopped the Japanese advance into the Western Sea, gave Korea and Ming China a chance to regroup. Yi rebuilt the navy over the following months. New ships, new men, new training. The Korean Navy became strong again. In 1598, Hideyoshi died, and Japanese leaders decided to withdraw. On December 16th, 1598, the last great battle took place. the Battle of Noryang. Yi, together with the Korean and Ming China fleets, attacked the withdrawing Japanese navy. The battle began at dawn and was fierce. The Japanese were fleeing, but Yi didn't give up pursuit. In the middle of the battle, Yi was suddenly shot in the chest. A random bullet fired from an enemy ship had hit under his left armpit. He realized the wound was fatal. His last words are legendary. The battle is at its height. Wear my armor, beat my war drums. Do not announce my death. Only 2 people witnessed his death, his son Yi Ho and his nephew Yi Wan. They carried his body to his cabin. No one noticed. The battle continued and ended with Korean victory. Even in death, Yi had directed his army. Yi Sun-sin was 53 years old. He had fought in 23 naval battles, had never been defeated. He had never lost a single ship. His tactics, strategies, leadership influenced modern naval warfare. At the beginning of the 20th century, when Japanese Admiral Togo Heihachiuro destroyed the Russian Navy, a journalist asked, "Can we compare you with England's Admiral Nelson?" Togo answered, "Being compared with Nelson is acceptable, but not with Korea's Yi Sun-sin. He is incomparable. Nelson and I fought with government support, but General Yi won victory without any support. Compared to him, I am only a petty officer. Yi Sun-sin's legacy still lives in Korea. His statue stands in Gwanghwamun Square in Seoul, continuing to protect the people with his sword in hand. His war diary, Nanjong Ilgi, is recognized by UNESCO and is priceless for military history. What was the secret of his success? 3 things: strategy, discipline, and courage. In terms of strategy, in every battle he masterfully used geography, targeted the enemy's weaknesses, and maximized his own strengths. Regarding discipline, he trained his crew flawlessly. Every man knew his duty, and every ship was perfectly coordinated. In terms of courage, even in situations that seemed impossible, he didn't give up. At Myeongyang, he drove his ship alone toward the enemy, setting an example for his crew and dragging them after him. In modern naval academies, Yi Sun-sin's tactics are still taught. Crane wing formation, the art of using geography, psychological warfare techniques, all contributed to naval warfare doctrine. This is Yi Sun-sin's story, a legendary leader who challenged around 330 ships with 13 ships, who was never defeated, who commanded even in death. The combination of strategy and courage, discipline and genius. History will never forget his name, because he didn't just win battles, he made the impossible possible. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to like and subscribe. Write in the comments which historical commander's story you'd like to hear. See you in the next video. Goodbye.